Welcome to Space to Lead, the podcast where leaders and teams come together to learn, grow, and thrive. Each episode brings fresh insights and real conversations with leaders and industry experts who are shaping the future of leadership. We explore strategies to build dynamic, engaging cultures, whether you're leading from the front or making an impact within your team. So take a deep breath, make some space, and let's lead together.
Have you ever found yourself struggling to balance all the demands put on you as a leader? From working in complex environments to trying to meet increasing demands to meet expectations, to looking after your team, while also trying to find time to take care of yourself, leadership can be challenging. How do we balance the tension to keep things moving while also creating space to refine and enhance our leadership practice? I'm thrilled today to be joined by Suzanne Fox. Suzanne's worked in a variety of senior leadership roles over the past 2 decades and has a firm belief in the power of meaningful conversations, genuine connections, and compassionate approaches to drive exceptional outcomes for businesses, leaders, and teams. Suzanne, it is so good to have you here today.
Thanks, David. Excited to be with you in this space.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to our conversation today, because I know both you and I have been leaders in the public sector. We now work with leaders across the public sector in the province. And I don't know about you, but I'm noticing it's becoming increasingly challenging for leaders to navigate the complexities of being leaders in the current political climate. And would just love to create a bit of space to explore that with you.
Oh, juicy topic. I'd love to do that. And yeah, it's hard to hear some of the leaders speak today about the complexities in which they're working in, and a privilege to be working with them.
Yeah. I know my experience has been, I've just had a couple really interesting conversations with leaders who are new to the public sector and navigating being an effective leader, which is a challenge on itself, as well as sort of figuring out the political dynamics and how to navigate that.
Yeah. In my experience as well, I can recall hiring a leader from private sector into public and just really seeing the discomfort of how to fit into that space. And one of the things I talked to her a lot about, was I really wanted her to stay in the space, because I thought we had a lot to learn from her, was around what was her integrity like? How would she stay in that space of understanding her values, to work through the mess in which felt like she was walking into? Really powerful space to be in your integrity, know who you are, um, and listen to what's going on around you and see what's going on around you.
Mm. So reading between the lines, I think I hear you saying you don't have to compromise your integrity to be influential. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. There's a really key intersection with our integrity around how we enter into spaces, especially complex spaces, complex environments. And that intersection comes in the place of, we need to understand a bit of the power that's in the right room and what the power we hold. We need to understand how to influence and where we can influence, and then how do we show up in those spaces. I like to call that savvy. So political savvy is an example, versus political acumen. But how do we show up in those spaces, in that intersection of those three things that are playing together all the time, and still maintaining my integrity and who I am in that space?
Hmm. That's a big topic.
It is.
So where do we start as leaders when we're reflecting on this idea of sort of anchored in your integrity and your values while you're
Mhm.
leading in often what are high pressure environments where there's a lot of expectations?
Yeah, it's not an easy skill set to master, and I can tell you I've skinned my knees many times in my career. But there are a lot of tools and a lot of frameworks in which can help leaders step into, using that integrity in a way that helps them answer questions of teams and to teams, that allow them to continue to influence in complexity. I think one of the things leaders feel today is the pressure to move, And when we're trying to influence and understand our environments that are so complex, it's not a fast process. It's a slow process. And there's this tension we live in, paradox polarity of fast and slow. And I think it's really hard for leaders because at times moving quickly means we've missed a whole bunch of steps around engaging the right people, ensuring we have the right stakeholders, and it can add to the complexity and then the length and or the discourse that comes after a change, as an example, because we haven't slowed down to take the time.
Interesting. And what's coming up for me as you're saying this is, well, it's great to slow down,
Mhm.
but will the system allow it?
Oh boy, David, that is a tough one. I think leaders need to really be bold and lean into slowing the system down. So, and really asking good questions around the speed and what the outcomes are we're looking for. And is there other ways in which we can get there? So, leadership isn't always easy. Um, Probably not politically correct, but I had a leader tell me many, many years ago, leadership isn't for sissies. And I hold on to that for myself because I've had to lean into situations many times where it has felt uncomfortable and asked to slow things down because of what I could see some of the implications were on a change or on a process. So I think for leaders, we need to find that courage. Courage comes in many ways, but we have to be able to understand the environments. And by doing that, we can influence things in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And as you're speaking, two things are coming to mind for me. One is it sounds like there's a mindset shift that has to happen
Mhm.
here. And the other piece that's sort of coming to play is resilience,
Yeah.
and the need for resilience in order to do all these things that you've described, to slow down and to really impact the system in a bigger way by slowing down. Where do those two fit in from the work that you've done?
Yeah. So I 100% agree with you. When we can slow down and actually read rooms in a way that support us to do good things, we actually build our resilience. Because in that, we're building our networks of people that help us have resilience. We might be pausing, which is helping our brains slow down so we can think differently and get out of our emotions when we're attached to things. So, in actual fact, slowing down for leaders is really a resilience tactic. And it's really hard to do. We know we have systems that drive meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. And even putting a 5 minute gap or 10-minute gap at the end of a meeting or the beginning of a meeting can feel impossible for people. When the shift happens, that we can do that and allow ourselves to get some water, go to the bathroom, just breathe in between those. It's amazing the difference that can happen for us and how we structure and move things along and read the room, so to speak. So this is all about resilience and leaders leaning into some of the difficult work of pausing a little bit in order to move faster in the long run.
We're in a podcast, so you can't actually see me, but I'm smiling because, again, what's coming up for me is great. Yeah, let's add a pause. Let's slow down. Let's learn to be a little bit more resilient. And sometimes the system just doesn't allow that. I'm thinking to some work that I did a while back in the health field. We were doing a leadership program with leaders, and right in the midst of it, COVID hit. And I remember asking a leader exactly what you suggested. What would it be like if you just took 5 minutes between meetings just to do a bit of a walk and clear your head and sort of catch your breath? And their
Mhm.
response, that seems very indulgent. Again,
Interesting.
because the larger system, external pressures, COVID in that case,
Yeah.
really was putting a lot of demands that creating those pauses or those spaces or slowing down that you described just did not even seem possible.
So sometimes I see the impossible as possibility for us to see what we can do differently. I worked through COVID in a big health authority with lots going on and feel like I was able to still pause and breathe because I prioritized myself and my team in order to sustain the long game. And I think what happened was it was role modeling for other people. Now, let me be clear, it wasn't perfect all the time. I always like to say I'm perfectly imperfect, but I really felt that if I didn't do that, the outcomes for my people and myself and the team and the organization weren't going to be what we needed them to be. So please don't take this wrong. It's not easy to do. And I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to know where our limits are and to continue to build these things into our days in order to stay in the game for a longer term. And
Yeah.
truly, why I've stepped away from the space, because I think I have learned through multiple mistakes. I always like to say not mistakes, I say mistakes, that when we can care for ourselves and we can build in micro breaks, we'll build our resilience, and that comes in multiple frames, which will have us staying in the long game in a different way.
Mm, I love that. I love that reminder that while something can seem impossible, it just takes one person to model the behavior to show us
Mhm.
that there is a different possibility, a different path that we can take. It actually brings to mind, have you ever seen that video, The Lone Dancer?
Yes,
Yeah, I'll make sure and throw it in
yes,
the show notes for folks. But it's kind of
yes.
crazy, someone out on the beach dancing all by themselves, and before long, other people start to join
Yeah.
and join the movement, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a great representation, actually, of modeling the way and seeing what things happen, and actually pausing and being in that for a while to see what will come. I'm smiling too, David, because one of the videos I love to use for the same message is the little boy dancing. And he's got like a little khaki outfit on, and he's really having fun at his school play, and all the other little kids are kind of looking at him, and then they start dancing as well. Being the leader who actually can role model, it happens at all ages and stages of our life, to support others to try and see the opportunities versus the impossibilities, or what feel like impossibilities.
So when you think of this idea of leaders role modeling, what does a leader need to do to kind of get them out of that pattern, kind of
Mm.
kickstart this idea of role modeling, doing something different, challenging the system? How do they do that?
So interestingly enough, I just worked with a team in the public sector around just starting to build some simple rules for their team that they could all agree to and start to leverage from a team perspective, which will actually create some tension with the teams around them. But needing to stick to that so that they can actually start to see the pattern shift. So we know when we make decision A, that leads us down to a road or a new pattern. When we make decision B, that road and pattern look different. So every shift we make can change a pattern. And if you have enough people to actually lean into, as an example, simple rules, ground rules, bridging blocks for your team, that can help other teams start to shift as well. So again, it only needs to be some small things. I've worked with a leader last week, 8 to 9 in the morning. She's committed for the next 3 months. That's going to be her time to set her day up and get ready. And she's intentionally not going to book for that. And that will take some practice and some, I'm sure, hard times. You've got to start somewhere. Even if it's 15 minutes, just start, try. Changing our habits is not easy.
Beautiful. I love that. And in fact, that concept and idea was the genesis for Space to Lead. Where the
Mm,
podcast started was I would work with leaders and I would challenge them to put a 30-minute recurring calendar item every
ah,
Friday, 30 minutes. And this is the
yeah.
dedicated time just to pause, reflect, think about their leadership. It could be to look back on the week past, what happened, what
Mhm.
occurred, what steps did I take to achieve a goal that I was working on, or maybe to look ahead to the week ahead and look at their calendar and look at what can I get rid of so I can create a little bit more
Mhm.
space for myself. And I agree with you, it doesn't take huge things. It's sometimes those
Mhm.
smaller things that can be more impactful and create a ripple in the system. And then it's
Mhm.
time to look again and reevaluate because now the system's
Yeah.
changed. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's iterative, right? And it's happening all the time. And I mean, I'm in this myself as a, business owner now, and learning through those things in my first couple of years in my schedule. I'm constantly iterating. How do I get more balance? And not always easy to say no when I really want to say yes. but I know I need to go look after myself and go for my walks or get out and or go see my parents. There are other things we need to do that actually support our resilience.
Hmm.
And I'm much better when I come back. And that allows me to stay in my integrity, just to bring us back to where we started, because that's who I am. I am the friend, the daughter, the wife, the stepmom who wants to be present for those people. And I'm the leader who wants to be present for my teams. And if I don't do some of those things to allow myself to breathe and pause, I can't be on the top of my game.
So you have all these elements of you and you as a leader that you want to
Mhm.
bring into that space. Where do leaders tend to get stuck?
I do think some of it is the pressure of the system, for sure, and the worry that I may let somebody down, or the worry that I've got to drive because I'm looking for the next role or I'm looking for the next thing. And what I would say is, when you get to the next thing or you let the system take over, that's how we get to burnout and we get to resentment and we get to, I can't do this anymore. And that's a really big mind shift to take, that when I can do some of the other things, I'm actually going to be better for all of those things, better for the next role, better for the system. All I'll say is start small. As human beings, we often think, I always use the analogy, oh, if you're a runner, you're going to go run a marathon. You don't just go run a marathon. You have to walk, run, take days off, take rest days. You have to oscillate between activity and rest. And I think leaders really need to understand that has to happen. They say every 120 minutes, we need at least 15 minutes to kind of break. And I know lots of people listening to that will be rolling their eyes right now, thinking that's impossible. And I'm here to say it's not impossible. Start with 5.
Mm, that small start you referenced earlier. Some good tips for me as a leader.
Mhm.
And as you mentioned, the system doesn't always create space or allow for that. If we were to zoom out and look a little bit broader and look at a leadership team, are there any small starts that a team could collectively look at to be more effective, to be more resilient, to be more influential within a system?
Yeah, so there's a couple things I want to respond to that, because I think, the people in the system are the system. So, how do we empower those leaders and teams to say we are part of the system? And how do we do our part in the system to shift it? Maybe it's just a connection before content to start the meeting, which allows people to connect to one another in a personal way that builds resilience from oh, my colleague's going through a tough time right now, and I just need to be different today to support them because I'm connecting with them before we're diving into the agenda, so to speak. I really think there's a gap in us connecting as humans in our workspaces. And that's something that can help teams start to see each other differently and see different perspectives. From a integrity perspective, we all have our own values and our own beliefs, but how do we start to open up and look at different perspectives that can allow different conversations in a team meeting that we're gonna see each other differently?
Yeah, I have this visual as you're describing that of an executive team walking in, sitting around the board table. But the reality is, in addition to them walking in the room, they're each carrying this big box
Mhm,
full of all this stuff about them, their values, what's important to them, that's maybe not as apparent or visible. And so,
mhm,
how do we create space to share and bring some of that into the open?
mhm,
And as it becomes more open, how does it influence how we work together, how we interact, how we support one another, which all helps to build resilience?
mhm. I
Mm,
sat at a table, a executive C-suite table for a while, where once a week there was always somebody who had to present themselves and what they were grateful for the past week. And it was a real great connection at the table to get to know people outside of work. I can remember sharing a picture of my parents, who I'm very close to, who are aging and in the system, needing all of us to do our best work every day in order to make this access to care seamless as possible. I just felt like that was a real connection for us to understand that we all have work, we all have lives outside of work, and my values and my integrity and my who I am show up in those conversations more than any other conversation you'll have with me.
Mm-hmm. And you do a lot of work with executives and with executive teams.
Hmm.
How do you overcome the resistance to creating space for those kind of conversations?
Yeah, not always easy. But sometimes it doesn't even come right away. It takes time to build the trust in the space in order for people to feel safe enough that whatever I might be sharing isn't going to be outside the space. But it really is about getting people back to the human connection when there is a lot of, I'll say, complexities, both personally, interpersonally, and system in the room. Why are we all here? As an example, what is the business we're running, and what is the reason or the why we come to work? Because I think if we can come back to that, of course, as a registered nurse, my why was always and still is, to be honest, what does the patient, client, or resident in the system need from us? And when we can stay focused on the why, the purpose of why we come to work every day, and see each other as humans, I think it allows for much more effective communication.
Beautiful. We come
Yeah.
back to some good points, some good tips and tricks and things that we can do individually as leaders,
Mhm.
collectively as leaders, and as a team. As we think about our listeners and we think about, they dedicated 20 minutes to listening to you and I have this conversation today, where should someone start? What's one tip you can give to get them started on this path?
The one tip I would give any leader is make sure you know your values. So many of us leaders, early in my career, I didn't understand what my values were at a core level, that I could understand when they were making me feel good and when they were getting pushed. And they change. Your values will change over time. They should change over time as you gain experience contextually. The first step is, what do I value that's going to bring me to this space and all of me to this space? Because when we can get there, magic happens.
Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do in helping people explore, define, and really articulate their values?
I think that there's multiple exercises people can do. I like to take leaders and give them, 50, 60 words to start from, so they can start to process what is actually important to them, and getting them down to eventually 2 to 3, which is a very painful process for leaders to go through when they come with 20. These are all my values, and I'm so proud of all my values. And I'm always giggling underneath because I think I also believe in some of those things. And I can't remember all of those things. As human beings, we can remember 3 max. And so, how do we help leaders? I help leaders get down to the top 3, and they start to nest things, and they start to see, well, this is kind of the same. And they get to these places of, oh my gosh, yesterday, now I know why I was angry in that meeting, because my autonomy was challenged. Or, I worked with a physician back east. She had a busy practice, she had a young family, her top value was family, and she was going to miss her grade 7 son's graduation, and she couldn't understand why she was so distraught and upset. And we were walking through it, and I said, let's just go back to your values. How are your values supporting you or not in this decision you're trying to make? And she just looked at me and she said, family's my number one value. And she said, I need to cancel my patients that afternoon so I can be there with my son. And I said, oh, okay. She sent me a picture after of her and her son, which is a bit, no, abnormal, for a coachy relationship. But she sent me a picture to say thank you, because she was able to reconcile what was internally and emotionally triggered for her, because she was just ignoring her values. And so everybody wins. Everybody
Yeah.
wins when we can get aligned in that way. And it also helps us in the complexities in which we work every day.
Beautiful. I love that story. Thank you for sharing. And it really
Mhm.
ties to the flow of the conversation. While we talked about many different things, what I'm taking away is at the foundation, if we have a good understanding of ourselves, our values, what drives us, it can create a lot more clarity in the system around us. What's upsetting us, what's triggering us, and if we can better understand that noise, we can be more effective as leaders.
Mhm.
We can be more effective in our interactions with others. And if we're more effective, there should be some room to create some pauses and create space, that space that you were talking about at the beginning of the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, space to lead.
Yeah. Suzanne, thank you for creating some space for this conversation today. Touched on many, many things, and I suspect in future conversations we'll be able to explore them even further.
Thanks, David. It's been a pleasure being with you today.
If there's one key takeaway from our conversation with Suzanne, it's that the foundation of effective leadership lies with a deep understanding of ourselves, our values, and what drives us. In our conversation, we referenced Simple Rules, which is based on the work of Glenda O. Young of the Human Systems Dynamics Institute, as well as a couple videos, which we will share in our show notes. If you'd like to learn more about Suzanne, you can find her on LinkedIn or at foxdenconsulting.com. And if you've enjoyed our conversation today, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for joining us on Space to Lead. See you next time.